Welcome to Barbell's Business and Booze, where we discuss navigating everyday life as lifters, business owners, and being a woman in a male-dominated industry. I'm Christy and
I'm Brittany Diamond.
And today we are talking about a topic that Brittany and I are super familiar with, which is moving across country. We're living that gypsy lifestyle, some jet setters.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about it because I feel like ever since I've done it, I've been pretty open about it on social media, of course. And, people always ask me, like, I hate to be like that. People always ask me, but it's a common question.
Yeah.
Like, what advice would you have, or how'd you do it? All that. So we'll get into it. But I first wanted to mention, because Christy and I were just catching up before this. And if you've been listening to all our episodes, we talked about in our social media episode how sometimes Christy notices when she posts like a sexy picture or something, she'll actually lose a ton of followers, even though she gets good engagement. And I wanted to do a little test. So when we did our OnlyFans episode, which if you haven't listened to it, you should, I posted like definitely something more risque. It was like me in lingerie, like posing. And it was, I'm going to look at the analytics now because it did so well, but I lost like 2,000 followers immediately.
Isn't that funny? People are like, oh, you're only doing that for attention, only for like the followers. Yeah. And it's like, I always lose followers for that. But yeah, always, of course, you're going to get the likes and get traction. It's so, it's just so crazy. Not saying that we care that much, but it is an interesting experiment, to like look at like when you gain followers and when you lose them.
Yeah. So my analytics where I got 80,809 plays, 2,700 likes, 44 comments. It was forwarded 885 times, and it got 2,003 saves.
Okay. Do you have that new thing on Instagram when you open a reel? It'll say for insights, it says your reel has a total watch time of 38.4 hours. That only happened in my last reel. It's like a new feature Instagram has, but I think it's hilarious. For insights, they tell you accumulatively how many hours it has been watched. It's just funny to see.
I had it on some of them, but not this one.
Yeah, not like like the newest ones you probably have it, but I just thought it's interesting because you're like, wow, 40,000 hours of my butt has been watched.
It's funny because I was at like 61K or something. And again, we talk about not that we need to care about followers because our business is fine, but now I've been like stuck at 59.7 for like, I don't know, years.
It's like when you go like to like lose or gain weight and it's like, you're like, oh, I finally am into the 160s. And then like the next morning you're in the 150s again. Like it's like 100, follower difference was like whatever. But it's just crazy because if you saw those people in a room just get up and leave, that's a lot of people.
Yeah,
like, I know. Too, you might say like, I don't have a lot of followers, but you're like, that's a small city that the amount of followers you have, right? But yeah, that's 100 people deciding or whatever amount of people deciding to leave. It's just interesting, like just making people make a decision. It's crazy. It's just super interesting because so whenever I post a butt pic, I really want to do it just to do it because I know I'm gonna lose followers. But yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes I wonder too, if also like with nudity and stuff like that, like or like risqueness, if Instagram sometimes, mutes it a little bit and hides it a little bit, or if they push it more just because getting more engagement. It's just interesting to think of how those things work just in like analyzing it.
I know it is interesting to me too. So anyways, let's talk about all of our moves.
Yeah. Went all over the place.
I honestly can't even count how many times I've moved in my life. Like it started, so when I was young, my mom was divorced and a single mom, and she got remarried, and we moved like countless times. The longest place I ever lived was 5th grade summer. We moved from Lynn, Massachusetts, which if anyone knows that place, it's not a great place. That kind of always shocks people. I actually don't really say I'm from there because it's just not called Lin City of Sin. So my mom really wanted to leave there before middle school because it was in a very dangerous area. So we moved to about an hour away, still in Massachusetts, called Gloucester. I was there from 5th grade, and I lived there until my parents still live there, but I lived there until my senior year of high school. That was the longest place I've ever lived. And then since college, I'm not exaggerating, I've probably moved about 16 or 17 times.
Yeah, that's a lot of like U-Hauling and all that fun stuff. No, I can totally relate to. And it's funny, it's like I don't think I could remember how many times I've moved either. Like with at least like those little moves too, right? Like there's
Yeah.
times where you're moving from apartment to apartment, place to place, all that stuff. And I'm definitely didn't have the same childhood as you. I didn't move as much, but I pretty much stayed at the same place pretty much my whole childhood until I was 18. And that's when I moved to Chicago. And that's kind of when everything kind of started for me with
Yeah.
moving. I moved to Chicago. Although I was in Chicago for about 5 years for the first stint, I moved to a couple places there and then moved to Indiana for a short while and then back to St. Louis for a short while, and then back to Chicago for a few years um, and then so going from St. Louis to Chicago is not that far. It's five
But
hours, but
still,
it's still like you're not attending family functions, that
yeah.
kind of stuff. And then to LA, which was crazy because I always considered myself an East Coaster. Like I'm like if I want a city, it'd be probably New York City. I wasn't like LA just seemed like too like surfer chill. I mean, I didn't really know much about LA, but palm trees. I moved to LA cross country, and then holy shit, I moved to the very opposite side and in the South, in the Bible Belt, so different in South Carolina. If you would have
Yeah.
told me I would end up South Carolina, that's crazy. So we both have a lot of experience with moving and cross country moving, which is going to be a big focus today.
Yeah. So, okay, so let me just get this straight. So it was Chicago, St. Louis, LA, and then where you are now, South Carolina. So four cross country
It,
moves. I know the first one wasn't like a cross country move,
yeah.
but
Yeah. And Indiana, but that was like
yeah, okay.
basically like an hour away from Chicago. So it doesn't count too much. But let's just say I've lived in 5 different states.
Okay. Yeah. So mine, I haven't lived as many places as you, but I did three big moves in less than 12 months. So I feel like it was actually kind of traumatic. So I know you know the story, but
Yeah, it's like a condensed, it was a lot. I feel like that makes it
yeah.
even harder. Yeah.
So I'll kind of quickly recap the timeline. So January of 2022, I moved just down the street to a place in Rhode Island with me and Rosie, and I went in with the intention I am moving here and I'm staying here until I buy a house. I absolutely loved it. I set it up exactly how I wanted, all my stuff that I loved. It was like a girl palace, and it was right near the woods, so I could go on my daily rock and walk with Rosie, and had 2 floors. It was right near gyms I liked, only 2 hours from family, had water nearby. Like I absolutely just loved it. So that was January 1st when I moved. And then in March, my best friend Shui was coming over for the weekend, and we just went to the gym, and she was leaving and I was just making food, and she like called me. She's like, "Hey, you have this weird note on your door." I was like, all right. So I went down, and it was from the Cumberland, that's the town I lived in, Rhode Island, water department. And it basically said that like I needed to evacuate within 24 hours. My place wasn't legal. So I was like, what? So I called my landlord. She's in the Bahamas, and she was like completely in the dark. She's like, don't move your stuff. We'll get a lawyer. I'm like, okay. Like, and then so I ended up calling the town. It was just like a clusterfuck of a few days. I wasn't really in panic mode because I was in survival mode. So I was like, all right, what do I do? So I started looking at Airbnbs, and because I figured in my head, like, this is just going to be like a week thing. They'll go to court, all good. I ended up staying down the street. Luckily, my friend Stephanie, who had just gotten engaged, was moving in with her partner. And so she still had her apartment for like another month. So I moved there, and then like I kept calling every day, and I was just getting a weird vibe. Like like, I don't know if the mafia was involved. Like, my landlord's husband owned like half the town. You know, Rhode Island's a small state in the US. He owned like half the rental properties. And I had been with them too, my prior rental, for 2 years. So, anyways, whatever. I started looking for a new place and like there's a housing shortage. And I was starting to get really nervous because I didn't want to live with someone. I didn't know where to go. And I haven't lived, I'm 29 years old at this point. I haven't lived home since I was 17. And like, I work for myself. I have an office. I have a routine. I was just like, the idea of that turned me off. So I made the impulsive decision, and I am not very impulsive anymore. I think things through almost too much. So I was newly dating a guy, and he lived in Washington. And for anyone listening, this is just like a crazy, not
I
like
know,
me at
but
all.
yeah, and I'm over here, so we're so far apart still. Like I was in South Carolina at the time, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
And so, here when I hear about your life, you know, it's like, okay, yeah, that does sound crazy, but like I have done the same thing before. And, like, you're kind of like with your friends, like, oh, like they know what's best for them. They're gonna like, go do it. So when you're like telling me this, I'm kind of like, you're excited about it. I'm excited about it.
yeah, yeah. So it's just gonna get real, but I was excited about it. So, I was talking to my then boyfriend, and he was in Vancouver, Washington, not Canada. So literally the opposite side of the country. I'd never been there. I was like Googling it. I'm like, oh, I love the outdoors. It looks beautiful. His gym looks great. There's a strongman community. Cool. I've never seen his place. And when I tell you that I'm like a nester, like I like my home to be beautiful, and I like it to have the right energy because that's where I do my creative work. That's where I work. So I was excited. I was about to turn 30, and I was like, you know what? I've always fantasized about moving cross country. I actually almost moved to Arizona before, but I kind of like chickened out. So I was like, now's my chance. If I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. So I sold everything within a week. I just put up an ad on Facebook Marketplace, and my important things, like, my trophies and like things that meant a lot to me, I wrapped those up nicely and I gave them to my mom. They're still there in her basement. Thanks, Mom. I appreciate you letting me keep all my stuff there. And um yeah, I shipped like my clothes, but it was really, 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 really humbling. I didn't realize it at the time, but like, to me, like, I had worked my ass off for that stuff, I guess, because I didn't like grow up with much. And so it was like hard for me to like let go of some of my stuff. So
The
anyways, I was like,
sparkly table.
so I was starting new. So then I get to Washington, and I think the most traumatic part for me, which no one should ever be in this situation, my dog, Rosie, who's like my daughter, was also undergoing heartworm treatment at this time. So she could not travel. She was on bed rest, steroids for several months. So one of my clients that I trusted wholeheartedly was an animal lover, took care of her because, it was just like an abrupt time in my life. So I get there, and for the first week and a half, you and I were talking a lot. I was excited. We had our ESPN gig coming up. I was turning 30. So everything was just like super exciting. So the first 10 days were good. Once I got home, so, I moved cross country. Then I go to the other side of the country with you. We were in North Carolina for ESPN. Yeah, Hilton Head
South
Island.
Carolina.
South
South
Carolina,
Carolina.
sorry. Yeah. And then I get home, and it's like that period when you're kind of on vacation and you're like, I want to go home. So it was 2 weeks into it, and I'm like, I want to go home. I miss my dog. I don't have an office. I'm in this new relationship, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate around each other. I felt very uncomfortable. Like, I was working, I went from having like a nice office to like working like on the floor in a living room. And mind you, like, two men had lived there before. So I was like trying to clean and like make it feel like myself. And it was just like, looking back, I'm thankful for it because, it was such a low in my life. And it probably sounds dramatic. Like, I've been through worse. I've been through like abusive relationships, deaths, illnesses, injuries. But like, this just felt like so foreign. I was so homesick and I didn't want anyone to see how sad I was. So I would pretty much every morning on my morning walk, I would like cry. Um, and just like I tried to stay positive, and it rained all the time there. And like I did make I made friends, but I just felt very, very uncomfortable, like foreign and just super unhappy, very unhappy. And yeah, like I missed my dog, I missed my family, I missed the ocean, I missed sun. Like I remember one day I was just praying, and I'm not someone that's religious. I was just like, please God, like if there's hope, like let me see the sun today. Let me please see the sun. And it came out. I was on a hike and it came out, and that's when I just knew, I'm like, all right, everything is gonna be okay. This is just a lesson. I'm gonna embrace this journey. And then like 2 weeks later, I was up late at night because I couldn't sleep. I was going through the worst, like, I think my anxiety was just so high and I was in survival mode. I was not sleeping. I did not feel comfortable. I did not feel safe. I was scared. So I told my boyfriend, I was like, I hate it here. I can't do this. Like, I'm not okay here. And he was like, all right, like, where can we move? And I'm like, I don't know. And he suggested Vegas, which is the last place on planet Earth Brittany Diamond would
Oh
move.
my
I do
gosh.
not like the desert. I do not like the heat. And here I am.
Oh my
we
gosh.
we kind of decided because, we were both in the fitness industry at that time in my life. My goal was to turn pro in women's physique. That was what I had my eyes narrowed on. So I was like, okay, Vegas will be a great place for that. The community of that is huge. Let me tell you, everything happens for a reason. I won't be in Vegas forever, but it's a perfect place for my chapter right now. We actually, as people know, we broke up. I'm not afraid to admit that. Like, I made a mistake, wore my heart on my sleeve, took a chance, thankful for it. I learned a lot about myself. But yeah, so here I am in Vegas, and I don't know how much longer I'll be here, but I'm embracing it, and I'm actually kind of starting to like it. It took me about, we'll get more into this when we talk about like some of the benefits, but it took me about 14 months until I felt like, you know what? I kind of like it here. So, yeah, so that's my story. Sorry to talk so much.
No, it's interesting because I mean it makes me feel better because I'm glad that, I have someone who can relate to like the struggles because I think a lot of people don't put like for us when we did our moves, we both did our moves impulsively. Think about we think about the person we're going to be with at that place and what our life's gonna be like with them. But we forget about all those other little things like the culture, the type of community, the environment, like is going to change. And once that kind of dust settles, you're like, oh, I am here. Like it is different. So that's just it is a little shocking. It does take a long time to get used to a new place and like replant your roots and stuff like that. And I didn't realize that until this last move, really, for me, since I kind of did just kind of drop into the South a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, with
I think what you said is important too, because people like the idea of it sounds fun. It is exciting. It's an adventure, but it is very exhausting. The move itself, like you have adrenaline, you're excited, but like your day to day for the first few months is really hard because it's like you got to go to the grocery store, you got to go to the post office. You don't even know. And you're trying so hard to, stay afloat and stay positive, and like it is really, really hard. And I became close. Like, it's funny because a lot of my friends, you, and several others, like, we've all moved cross country. And I really do think it's something that I don't want to say everyone should experience it, but it makes you grow up in a and almost like more independent and kind of, know you can make it. Like, it sounds like I said, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, like, which sounds so dramatic. It's moving, but it really was.
yeah, and like for me, I moved around so much. For me, it always was exciting. Like I now that I'm in South Carolina for 3 years, a little bit over 3 years, you know, this is the longest time I've actually been in one spot for over a decade, it seems like,
Yeah.
and so it's just interesting because I'm very used to getting up and going. But the important thing is wherever I went, like when I went to, my closest friends, type like people, I spent my formative years in Chicago, you know, I had that when I came back, I had that group, I had that network. It was easy for me to build my business. When I went to LA, my sister and her husband lived there, but although, you know, if you're in LA, they lived in Los Feliz, and then I lived in Long Beach, which was like a world apart, but at least they were there. And I had a whole powerlifting community because I had competed with them before. When I've had flown to San Diego, met a bunch of people. You know, I did know people in California. So I had a lot of people in the industry. So I had that the community. I moved these places because I like the city, but also like I was motivated by like, oh yeah, I'm gonna hang out with these people there. You know, I have the community there.
Yeah.
That made it really, really helpful with the moving stuff. Yeah, it's hard. It's like such a bitch to sell all of your stuff, how to navigate, how getting your stuff over there, shipping your car or driving or whatever. It's so hard. It's expensive. Um, but at the end of the day, that like becomes the easy part when you kind of like settle down there and you're like, okay, like I gotta, you know, build my life here, really. But I've already kind of talked about my first move, big move from Chicago to LA in our episode about starting a business. And like you, I sold all my stuff. I pretty much packed some stuff in my car. I shipped it there. I didn't really own anything. And you know, I landed there, I had to get an apartment, all that stuff, and start fresh. And that's exactly what I did when I moved to South Carolina. So where I was at in my life, it was I did the Arnold March 2020, and COVID happened that month. And that in March 2020 is where I met my boyfriend Gary, and we talked, you know, for a while. And I visited a couple times during COVID. I actually turned 30 during COVID, which was not fun, especially in LA. My dear friend Uber Eats me a bagel sandwich, and that's all I did for birthday. I was like super isolated, so it was super lonely. You know, I was just it put in perspective. I'm like, okay, I'm in this apartment. I don't really have any things, which I'm fine with. I don't really have stuff. Like I didn't even have like a TV, or you know, I had like a dresser. Didn't have like a desk. I had like a desk stand, you know, stuff like that. And with COVID happening, it made me think like, okay, well, I feel like I'm like really missing something in my life, you know. So I think that's what why my relationship, with my boyfriend, um, kind of sped up, because I was like, I kind of realized what I wanted, and I felt this connection to this person, but across the world, not really across the country. So
Yeah, that's the
I
country.
visited 2 times, and then we said, hey, like my lease wasn't even up yet in LA, but you know, like hey, like I realize what's important in life. And that for me is like this relationship, because it's just when everything's all the lights and flashing lights and fun stuff in LA is stripped away, you're like, oh, I really just like, I, you know, don't have anything. So like obviously like I wanted to pursue things with Gary, but it was more of that realization, because in LA being 30 and being single mode, and you know, that's young, right? You're not like trying to like settle down or anything, but it made me realize what I was missing, and that this move could potentially be worth it, you know. And I could leave behind LA, because I started seeing what was ugly about it too.
Yeah.
So, and when I visited Gary, we go like nature hikes, all these waterfalls, all these fun things, you know, like he has 2 dogs. Now all of our dogs get along. It's just like, it just felt very natural. Although I'd never lived with a boyfriend before. And I had lived like alone for like 10 years. I didn't have a roommate. So it was going to be a big change. But anyway, I got rid of, well, honestly, I just put out a lot of my stuff on the curb, and people took it in like 30 seconds. Someone blew up my microwave with an M80, like 5 minutes after I put it out there. It was like honestly pretty crazy times when I moved. Like I was kind of ready to get out there. Didn't feel safe at all.
Yeah.
And so then I got up and moved. And honestly, I had the best time, especially for the first year and a half. Like Gary worked from home, just hang out all the time. It was like super fun. Um, and although I still have so much fun every day, the dust is settled, COVID's over, you know, Gary's back in work. I have to get my own routine in and make my own friends. But suddenly in this different culture, in the South, and of course, not everyone's like a Bible thumper right here. Not everyone's like old or whatever, but it's like a lot of people my age are married, have kids, um, have a little bit different values, and it's been harder for me to connect with people. I felt like there's more options for friends. Like it's harder to make friends here, and that's something I am struggling with because now with all like the dust settling and me going to my day to day life, that is working at my desk, going to coffee shop, da da da. I realize how different the culture is here because it's not just like you know me and Gary and then us at the gym. I'm trying to branch outside of that too. And that's something I never really realized was so like could be different, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I'm so used to the type of
No,
people in
yeah,
Chicago and California. I'm like, this is just so different. I don't feel like I fit. I
yeah.
feel different. And
Huh.
it might be because it's a smaller city. It's not small town, but a smaller city. So it's just something I didn't expect for me to struggle with, just feeling out of place.
Yeah.
And it's not nothing to do with my relationship, nothing to do with um the people here. They're so nice, but it's like I felt used to feel very more much connected, but also that might have something to do with me working so much online,
Mhm.
and I need to branch out and work with more people in person to actually build like connection, at something. But it's just something I didn't expect. The
Yeah.
culturally it being a little different, and um, but all that said, all that's challenging. I still think my move's worth it, and I still like don't regret it. And I still love it. But
Yeah.
it's it's just a weird thing. Like people, America is like all these different countries, and it's like one
I know.
country almost, and it's just so it's something I didn't expect because I felt like the move to Chicago and LA was very easy for me. And this was like, I'm not saying it's hard. I'm just like, I just am realizing, oh, I'm missing those type of friendships I had. Why haven't
Yeah.
I found them here?
It's interesting you say that about the culture because same. So, and where I've always been so involved with strongman, like I'm an East Coast New England girl. Like we are built different, right? Like so
Hmm.
the gym people that I was used to, it's like a lot of blue collar. I'm half
Yeah.
Italian, so it's like we have each other's back. Like we yell, we're loud. Like at the gym, it's more like we go after a hard day's work. And like I said, like the reason I changed my mind, so I was in this different chapter, like strongman, I will always love, I will always continue with it, but it's kind of just in my past. So I was on this like bodybuilding journey, trying to get my pro card when I decided to move to Vegas and the bodybuilding culture. I'll talk about how I like the culture here and how I don't, but I'm going to start off with why I don't. So bodybuilding culture back home, like like I said, blue collar, hardworking, like I don't know if it's because we have all these different seasons where we have to like survive -10 and then like 110 degrees. So got to Vegas and bodybuilding is like very, I'm not speaking for everyone, but it seems like people come here to bodybuild and like try and make it. So it seems like very fake. Like even at the gym, it's like people can't do anything except eat and go to the gym and they have to go to the gym. Like I felt very uncomfortable because I don't really look good when I go to the gym. Like I'm there to work. I'll wear like my old jailhouse t-shirt and like
Yeah.
ripped shorts and like I'll be grunting and like working my ass off and it's like all these people were like, had their hair and makeup done like they were going to the club and like perfect bodies and like their film crews and just like I get it. It's aesthetic. I get it. But that's just it wasn't me. So it kind of turned me off to bodybuilding. So I started branching out and like trying to get creative with how I could meet people. So I did things that were, and I guess this is where the kind of like personal growth and resilience comes in is like you said, like I really wanted my business is online. I wanted to connect with people and I wasn't making friends at the gym. That could just be because I was in my 30s too. It's a
Yeah.
little
And that's like
different.
where we're used to like making friends, right? Like,
Yeah. So I signed up for a Reiki course, which I met a bunch of like my best friend here. I met him there. And then I started like a meetup group that I would host. I still do where people like rock up mountains because I was like, you know what? I need connection in a different way. And I'm so thankful for it now because there were some times like I was just crying a lot. I'm like, what's wrong? Am I depressed? Like I started to think, so I like depression runs in my family. And I was like, okay, this is the age where it hits. Like this just must like I was really missing and like mourning mourning the loss of like who I used to be. Like I am a
Yeah.
friendly, outgoing, like, you know, people compliment me on my energy, which is the biggest compliment. And I just didn't feel like that person anymore. Like I didn't feel like getting dressed. I had to like really push myself to do things that were just normally easy for me. But my mom was also really, really sick at the time, and her and I are extremely close. And I will like I went a year and a half without physically seeing her. I was supposed to go home for Christmas and then I got pneumonia, and then she was supposed to visit me, but she wasn't cleared to fly because of her heart problems. And honestly, I finally went home in August. I mean, excuse me, the end of July, and I came back August 1st, and like just hugging my mom and seeing my family and seeing that my strongman community and everything was still all there for me gave me like a sense of utmost peace. And it wasn't until then when I came back sitting on the plane, like I did not want to come back to Vegas. I was crying. I was like, oh my God, I miss my family. I'm moving back. I was on Facebook Marketplace, like looking at places to live, but I promised myself, I was like, okay, you know, I'm mourning the loss of like being a professional athlete, pushing all the time, like scared. I was like, I'm just going to see this as a challenge and make the most of Vegas. And it's, you know, it's almost October 1st now. We're recording this on September 27th. And it was just recently that I started like, I really like it here. Like I said, I know it's not my forever place, but like I'm taking advantage of it now. Like I'm going to Utah next week to hike. I was just in California visiting my good friend and like got to see the ocean. And, you know, I finally have a car I like because I couldn't afford, it was like 10K to ship my car at the time. So I was driving something I hated. So I just now, and I think that says a lot because I think, especially if you're listening to this and you're an athlete and you're like a hard worker like Christy and I, like you kind of expect things to happen quick. And this has been a lesson that moving cross country, like, again, it took me over a year to feel okay. Like I was literally sad and depressed for a year. Yes, there were moments of happiness, but pretty much every day kind of sucked. I felt like I had this dark cloud over me.
Yeah. And I can totally relate to, so it really kind of messes with your own like identity, because like part of like who you are is, right, like your family, where you grew up, like where you come from, the type of like people. But if you're kind of struggling too, like you said, I've been struggling with this lately, is if your energy kind of changes too. It's like I'm used to people like being a trainer and people looking up to me and being excited about training with me, and um caring about what I say, and then also me making jokes and being excited and people thinking I'm funny, and like like we're going back and forth with the energy. And without those, like your like without when it kind of got stripped away from my friends and my people, it's kind of like, okay, I have to really remember who I am, like without those people and without being there. I have to still be me.
Yeah, I have a question because even though like your story of wearing your heart on your sleeve and being with Gary like worked out, for me it obviously didn't, and that's a risk I think anyone who decides to move across country or across the world for love, you know, you just gotta kind of like think about it might not work out, which for me it didn't. Which you know, how would you say you kind of, even though you're in a relationship like you said in 2020, you guys like were kind of glued to the hip because you had to be, like he was working for home, how did you kind of like find yourself in your like identity and independence?
Well, that definitely happened more once he went back to work. Because I kind of like, okay, like I kind of adopted his schedule of like when I woke up, when when I trained and all that stuff, just because we work side by side. And so I think just when like he went back to work, that's when I had to go, okay, like I need to like get out of the house, I need
Yeah.
to, like make my own life and all that stuff. So I just started going to more coffee shops, having some work by side by friends, and that just made me feel like more a person in the world. So, and honestly, I'm still so busy. It's not like I have been able to create my own thing here. What helps is like Thursday nights we have like a strongman Thursday night. So I have like when my clients comes, like I have some of my girlfriends come, and so we all train together, which helps tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been so busy traveling everywhere and
Yeah.
doing things. Honestly, I'm still like, I haven't still owned that I'm here yet. But I would like to, like I definitely would, but um, like you have to force yourself, like it would be hard if I was an introvert, you have to force yourself to go out there and, be
Yeah.
in the world and just be by yourself, like I saw you went out to breakfast by yourself the other day.
Yeah.
Like
No, I mean,
you do that all the time.
yeah, it's funny because I used to consider myself an extrovert, right? Like I was in medical sales and I coached in person, like always around people. And I know this probably sounds kind of corny, but I feel like the more you grow and like love yourself, like the more okay being by yourself you are. Because now, like, I still love people, but I was just I had a friend visiting this past weekend, and then on Sunday I was reporting at a powerlifting meet. And again, I love seeing people. I love giving people hugs, seeing people in person. But I kind of was excited just to like, all right, I don't like yesterday I didn't have any calls. I just had like online stuff, and I was like kind of really looking forward to my alone time. So it's kind of funny how that changes. But we've talked about some of the benefits and challenges. I also want to touch on like being self-employed and the financial challenges. So I want to hear from you how that kind of affected you, because it affected me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so it didn't it didn't affect me too much negatively.
Okay.
Um, unless you kind of like jog my memory on something negative that happened with it. I actually it was positive because moving in with someone who is structured with their workday made me more structured with my workday, and I worked more and I was more productive and I got more done. And with I'm and financially, like it just costs less to the cost of living is like less here.
And living with
Um,
someone.
yeah, and living with someone. So for me, it's been very positive in the money department. I will say a challenge that has to do with business is this is not like when you're in LA and everyone's like a content creator and you can just hire someone off the bat to like do your like record your videos and stuff like that. It's just not as abundant.
Mm.
For that kind of industry, like that, it's a little bit harder to find people who understand what you do and like to work with. But other than that, and there's less strongman here, less powerlifting than at least in California, and less like interest locally, and less people to collaborate with. So that in turn can affect my business. But I think the other things have been so much more positive that like I'm actually, you know, that's okay, for me. But yeah, I mean, it was hard moving here, right? Like, you have to figure out how to change stuff for your taxes, all the fun stuff. But for me,
Taxes,
coming from
yeah.
California, it's been better.
Yeah.
So let's maybe you can jog my memory of like what happened when I first moved here with your negative experiences.
Yeah, so mine was not a good financial experience at all. So upon moving right away, two of my sponsors dropped me pretty instantly because they saw that I wasn't like my sales went down so much for one of my apparel sponsors because I wasn't comfortable in the environment I was living in. Like,
Mm,
it's a huge adjustment for me. We talked in depth about this. Like I was still getting to know my then boyfriend, and I felt very odd like talking to the camera and like being myself. And like Gary, I am very structured, to the point where it's probably almost too much. Like I like to do this at this time. And the person I was dating was quite the opposite, which I learned a lot from that. But it was funny because in my head, we both were self-employed in the same industry. So I was like, oh, this will be awesome for business. He'll understand. But like the way we do things is completely different because he was more of an introvert. So he made his money, like he was excellent with like marketing and like email campaigns and stuff, where I even touched on this in my online coaching episode. Like I still get a lot of business from in-person stuff, and like being myself on social media and like talking. So I wasn't doing that. So I lost 2 sponsors, which felt like the end of the world. And then, I did a few seminars for free in Washington trying to build like my strongman clients, but they couldn't really afford my services. So, and then I moved to Vegas, which on the pro side, taxes are so much better here. The cost of living is great. But like I said, I moved here with a boyfriend. And then, so I was like, we opted for a rent that we could both afford individually. And then when we broke up, I was like, wow, this is so much for rent. But I made it happen. I just think, like I said, there was definitely some low moments, depression, and definitely some moments where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like I was so scared. Like I remember calling good friends and my mom and being like, okay, I still have this much money in the bank, but I have this fear. And then things turned around. I had to get kind of creative. I started going back to some in person, and just like really putting myself out there, doing more events, doing more reporting stuff. And yeah, so now I'm okay. Taxes were not fun. Living in 3 states in 1 year was a nightmare. The IRS like sent me, after I paid a bunch of money, they sent me like a notice saying I still owed like 10K. Luckily, it was their mistake. And then like health insurance stuff, it kind of made me smarter. And this year, taxes will hopefully be a lot easier now that I'm doing them
Yeah.
quarterly. And like I said, Nevada is one of the best places to live being self-employed compared to Massachusetts, aka
Yeah.
Massachusetts. So yeah.
Yeah, and same with California. I mean, man, I mean, we could talk over these business mistakes in a different episode too, but I got screwed over with the health insurance marketplace in California because I estimated my income wrong
Oh
as a
yeah.
self-employed person, so I owed a lot of money. And then
Oh
also, yeah, I've gotten I just you keep on getting letters from California, and you're like, what? I told you guys I moved, and then even like registering your car and stuff. One time I got pulled over here, and they're like, that your like title is suspended or something, and I was like, what? They're like, yeah, in California. Apparently, I didn't like go to the DMV and show them that I had insurance. So that was a big mess too. So
girl.
there's so much, and then you got to forward your mail, all this stuff. There's a lot. It's like it's pretty messy. Like you forget, it's just
Yeah.
so inconvenient. So my advice to anyone with business, just like hire an accountant.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I got a letter in the mail because I had gotten like X number of tickets in Massachusetts, like for small little stupid things. And they're like, you have to come back and go to court. And so I called them. I'm like, I live in Washington now. And they were like, okay, well, if you don't show up, you're going to be arrested. I'm like, what? So anyways, so I ended up like arguing with them, and I got like an online Zoom meeting court date, and everything was fine. But it just goes to show you like how messy things can get. And I guess that's what something to be prepared for if you do move. It's like it's not going to be as expect problems to arise for sure.
Yeah, it's just so inconvenient. There's so much like, you know.
What would you say in your experience moving? Like, what is looking back and reflecting? What has been the biggest takeaway, the biggest benefit to you as a person from undergoing all those moves?
Yeah, I wouldn't think this is like some kind of like this isn't gonna be like, oh, this is my best lesson or anything, but just since I've done it so much and I have been through so many experiences, I know that I mean, I know that I'm capable of doing it at any time. That's a superpower. We can take care of ourselves. We are able to adapt, although, and then also like I have so many friends everywhere,
Everywhere.
everywhere. So, so many people. So I just love that I have stories, experiences so many different like things and people. Um, and I definitely wouldn't take it back. It was just really fun. And, just knowing that no matter what, I can take care of myself um, and not even just trying to be like independent. Like if, let's say Gary got transferred and we had to go somewhere or something, I'd be able to handle that too. I'm not that I and I'm still learning how to be like secure in myself no matter what. just because, you know, like this new environment, like the community here has kind of rattled me a little bit. But um, just knowing, like, despite where you are, you know, you can stick to your guns. You're still you know, you're still, you know, you're not really the place that you're at, you know?
Mhm.
So those are like a few things that I've been really thinking about lately, just because, um, you know, when the homesickness comes in, I'm just like, well, you know, like you can, it's definitely worth it. You know, it's worth the experience.
This is kind of a full circle moment. I love this. I love that we're friends. We had only met
Yeah.
once at the Super Bowl commercial, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I don't know if you remember, but I'm not typically someone just to randomly DM someone, but I was like, hey, Christy, like I remember, like literally, like it was yesterday. I was sitting outside. It was a beautiful day. I was with both my dogs. And I was just like, I had this weird inclination to message you. I was like, I feel like I'm going to move cross. I think I told you, I said, I think I'm going to leave the long-term relationship I'm in and move cross country. Do you remember?
I think I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. I should go back and like
Oh my
read the
gosh.
DM. I would love to see that. And it's funny because I messaged you that, but then it didn't happen for almost 2 years. So it was
Mhm.
kind of like I was just planting that seed. So I guess for me, moving has just kind of taught me to like trust my intuition and like trust, again, that word journey. Like life really is a journey. And for me, the biggest lesson, like I said, I kind of just feel like I lost everything and started over. So it really taught me to appreciate life and not be materialistic. Like instead of like taking pride in all my shoes and nice clothes and like all these achievements and all my trophies that I proudly displayed, I feel like I stripped myself of all my material possessions and learned to appreciate, like when I talk about the smallest things, like when I was in my status, when I had like no community or friends here, I would just go for a walk in the morning with Rosie and like appreciate just like saying hi to a stranger or smiling at them and like stuff like that. So that kind of gave me a, I feel like I'm very adaptable. Like you could, like you said, you know, if Gary were to have to move and you know you could survive. And same thing with me. I feel like I could just, it gave me a good attitude towards life, and I feel like I could kind of, like I'd be confident to move to a different country now. Like I know I would be fine. So yeah.
What country would you move to?
Oh God, don't ask me that. I don't know. I'll tell you one thing. I probably won't ever move for love again.
Yeah, I would say, like, be smart about it. Mine worked out. I it was like, which is just crazy because I know it was so important. Looking back, I'm like, you know what? People were like, well, you know when you know. I'm like, I did know, but also like, should I have trusted that initial, like, you know? But
Honeymoon.
it worked out like really well. So I'm very
Yeah.
happy and no
No.
regrets.
I
So it
take I
can
take that
happen,
back.
but just be careful.
Yeah, I take that back. I would move for love, but
If you're listening, I would move for
but
love, but I have to be
but
someone that's done.
but I would need to visit first because you visited first. I didn't
Yeah.
visit, so I was like walking in the dark to not knowing what to
Yeah.
expect.
Yeah, like,
I think
if I came here and I felt very uncomfortable, or like I couldn't sleep, or I couldn't, you know, like see myself here, like, yeah, I want to move, but
yeah.
it just felt like normal, you know? So
So yeah, if you're listening, take, you know, it's never it's never too old to do it. Obviously, it gets harder, you know, the older you get because if you have kids or other factors, but it's possible, just like anything is possible. So if you're thinking of doing it, definitely urge you to think about it, reflect on it, visit the place, get a sense of what your day-to-day will be like. Yeah.
yeah, it's exciting starting over. That's honestly, like, I've done that so many times. It is really exciting. Be very lonely, but it can be, you know, really exhilarating, exciting. You get, you know, the
Yeah.
adrenaline. It's just so fun. But it will be tough, and it will teach you some things about yourself. But you know, it does get easier, but be patient. Like Brittany said, it took her a year. I super happy here, feel comfortable here, feel at home here, but I'm still trying to make friends here. So, and it's 3 years in, so it takes time.
Yeah. One small piece of advice I did that I think would help too, that helped me a lot was before I moved, when you're in that like excited phase, you know, your brain's like embracing a new opportunity, I made a playlist of like, I think I had like Starting Over by Chris Stapleton, like Christina Aguilera, like all songs that were just about like, moving and embracing and following your heart. And I feel like I still have that playlist. And I feel like on the really sad days, like, I'm a big music person, so I would listen to those and just try and evoke the feelings that I had when I was excited and not be filled with like regret, because I definitely regretted it sometimes. So I think that helped me. So maybe you can try that and just try to remember, like, I journal a lot. So sometimes I just look back at my journal so I could remember like how excited I was and what I was looking forward to when I was at that low point, because it's inevitable. Like if you move cross country, you're going to have days where you're homesick and you're very lonely. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's all we have. So feel free to reach out to us. Leave a comment if you've experienced a move, or maybe if you now have the balls to move, thanks to us. So yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.